right, but we got a team in transition to a certain extent, even though this is one of the more stable programs in the country. New OC, new DC, and we got Joe Long. Of course, we've got a lot of non-Clemson fans here asking about the Clemson Tigers for 22, and new defensive coordinator Wes Goodwin. What can we expect out of him, and should we have confidence that he's going to make this a seamless transition?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty seamless. I know a lot of people, when this hire was made and they heard the name Wes Goodwin, the first response was probably who? If you follow Clemson real closely, you probably heard the name. But, some people that follow the program closely might not even know who he was. But he's been Venables' right-hand man for quite some time. In fact, Venables wanted to take him to Oklahoma with him, and Dabo Swinney was not letting that happen. But, I think this defense is in fine hands under the guidance of Wes Goodwin. I don't expect monumental changes, some tweaks here and there. He talked about making things simpler, wanting the players to be able to play faster. But outside of that, I don't expect a whole lot of change. I think it's going to be a fairly smooth transition, and we'll see the same aggressive Clemson defense that we have for the past decade or so.
I was one of those guys who I was like, Wes Good, huh? Did you say Wes Craven? He stopped making movies and now he's coaching at Clemson? I tell you where he won me over, and in another life that is totally different than this one, I'm actually in the corporate world. And I will tell you, one of the things I look for when I'm meeting people who is in leadership is I like to hear what they say. I'm not saying how smooth they talk. It's what's the content of what they say. And the first interview I heard with him, Jason, was what won me. I said, of course, he's got a coach, and he could go out there and mess up. It was his persona. When he was asked questions about taking over for Venables, first of all, he was appreciative to Venables and the team that they would give him a chance, and he talked about everything that he learned. But then he turned around and he had almost a Bill Belichick kind of closed-in persona when he was talking about, hey, I just want to implement everything that I've learned, and I just want to make sure that we're the best that we can possibly be. He was not talking Dabo Swinney talking points. And that's one of the things that, especially in the corporate world, and anybody who worked in the corporate world, when you meet people who regurgitates almost line for line what the executive team says, that's not always a good thing. That a lot of times can mean that they're the suck-up who was playing golf with someone who just got the job, but them personally, they're terrible at their job, and they'll throw you under the bus to become part of the executive team. And I have unfortunately met more of those than I've met good leaders. Wes Goodwin won me on that interview, and then he went out. And I know it's just a bowl game; it wasn't against one of the upper echelon teams, but for him to take over and have to fill the shoes of a man that I wholeheartedly believe that without him we wouldn't have won those national championships. That was a big deal. And he's done it so far with a lot of grace, and he's very chill, and I like that. The one that I'm concerned about, I'm just going to throw this out there, and I don't want to take us off on a rabbit trail. I'm concerned about Streeter. I am concerned about him. Jason's way more on the inside than I am, but kind of outside looking in, I'm concerned about Streeter. I know that he has a long history with the team. I actually feel like he was an underrated football player when he played at Clemson. He was under a terrible system. He was part of a team that in the first year with Tommy Bowden went to Virginia Tech and almost beat Michael Vick in Virginia Tech. He was a good football player. But I felt like he, to me, has more to prove than Wes Goodwin. And I'm going to leave it at that because I have no personal ill will towards him. It's just I listened to his interview, and I've seen some things that makes me question, is he really the right man for the job? As to where Wes Goodwin, after that interview and seeing him coach, I really believe he is the man for the job, and he'll just have to prove me wrong. But on the other hand, I think Streeter is going to have to prove me right, which I know he's not worried about me with the money that he's making.
Yeah. That first interview, I remember it well. We were all kind of sitting over there waiting on Wes Goodwin to come over, and I'll never forget, man. He finally comes out and he says, "Come on, y'all! I know this is the one y'all been waiting on." Just kind of broke the water in a kind of a comedic way, man, and it's kind of been smooth sailing, ever since the few times he has met with the media. But you bring up a good point with Brandon Streeter, and I do think he's got a tough job on his hands. I'm of the opinion that the Clemson offense has gotten a little stale in recent seasons. It needs a fresh set of eyes on it. It needs some tweaks as far as the way the plays are called, some of the actual plays in the playbook. And if you listen to Streeter and Kyle Richardson talk during the spring and a couple of weeks ago, that those kind of things have been taking place. They're, like Wes Goodwin said, they were looking to do on the defense. Those two guys that are doing the same thing on the offensive side of the ball, they're trying to make things a little more simple. Take a lot of the stuff that they never use out and change a little bit of the terminology. And while I do think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on Streeter, especially after the way the offense played last year, I think he is the right guy for the job at the right time. He's kind of patiently waited his turn. He's had other opportunities to go elsewhere, turned them down, stay at Clemson. I go back to his days at Richmond, and those were some pretty good offenses he ran while he was the offensive coordinator there. And no, it's not Clemson. The pressure's not the same. It's not comparable from a pressure standpoint. But those were pretty good offenses, man. And he knows how to call plays. And I'm pretty confident in his ability from that standpoint. But make no mistake, I fully believe there is going to be a lot of pressure on Streeter and Richardson to get that offense turned around and kind of get it humming back on all cylinders like Clemson fans have become accustomed to seeing before last year. It'll be interesting to see exactly how much of Kyle Richardson's influence is on this thing. He's got an air raid background. Do we see any of that kind of mixed in, any wrinkles or anything? So it's going to be fun to watch.